And today's podcast, how to communicate like a giraffe. This has me intrigued.
Yes, on the
I've,
edge of your seat.
yeah, I've never heard of obviously how to communicate like a giraffe. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Adele, because I'm a bit gobsmacked by
Didn't even
this.
know what to ask.
No.
That's okay. Just to mention as well for viewers that might be watching us on the YouTube channel, rather than just listening in, Margaret's got a sore eye. So bless you, Margaret. If you do feel like you need to just close your eyes and listen for a little while and rest your poorly eye, that is totally okay with me. I will not be offended or think that you've fallen asleep. So yeah, today's podcast. Well, what it is about is something called non-violent communication. And it's a wonderful, wonderful skill, a wonderful tool, I think, just to play with and explore in your own relationships, um, whatever they may be, family, friends, even colleagues at work. And it's a kind of communication system invented by a guy called Marshall Rosenberg, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but it was invented in the 60s as a tool to do with the desegregation of schools in America and the United States. So I've got some notes here because, there are a few steps to it that we need to go through. But the reason he invented it, he was motivated to help people connect with their own humanity and that of others respectfully, compassionately, peacefully, and with joy, which I love. And I've looked at this. I've done trainings on it for my own sort of community in the past. But after doing a bit more research last week for the podcast, what I loved was I found that I think it's on his website, I'm not sure, that nonviolent communication is based on the yogic principle of ahimsa. So I love that because ahimsa, which I'm not sure if we've talked about here, if not, we definitely should do, is to do with non-violence and non-harming of ourselves and of others. Very yogic, you will agree. All to do with, peace, love, and light and all of that. But it's to do with really, really trying to live up to that highest vibration of love and kindness and empathy, again, for ourselves, first and foremost, which is something that not everybody does, unfortunately. And then, to all living beings, all creatures and all people, and treating everyone with that same level of kindness and love. So I love that it's based on a yogic principle, makes it very much in fitting with what I do, which is probably why I was drawn to it. So there are a few things about it and how to do it, but it's a way of everyone getting their needs met, which I love. So like if you often are in communication with someone, it's I don't know about you, but it can become about I need to get what I want, and that means that they don't get what they want,
Yeah, it
or
should be
vice
mutual.
versa. Yeah. And then that can mean one of the people have to do more of the compromising and therefore feel more pissed off with the outcome. Like, oh, well, they want to do this and they want me to do this, or I want them to do X, Y, and Z. So you're trying to manipulate and change how someone else acts, basically, to suit your needs, because we all have needs. But then that means they're doing it they're doing it as a bit of a grudge fest. It's not coming from a place of love. Whereas human beings, we actually want to help. We actually want to help each other. Do you know when you help someone and you do it from a place of like your cup being full and you just want to help, that feels amazing, doesn't it? Like we always feel great when we do that. We're always like, oh, I feel really good, and you've done your good deed. Like I did a good deed today. Rather than when you do something where it's like if like your partner says, if you don't do, we were just chatting before this, by the way, about people not doing things that we want in terms of like doing the house if you're not there, sorting out
Yeah.
the jobs and things like that. But if you're like, if you don't do this while I'm out, then I'm going to be really, really angry with you when I get home. So there's going to be some kind of consequence. They
Mm.
might do it, but
But
there's this feeling of
mm,
you
Yeah,
know,
there's a feeling of angst about
like
it.
distaste in their
Yeah.
mouth, and they're doing it like whilst they're gritting their teeth and calling your names under their breath. So if there's a way for them to do it, still do what you want them to do and to feel great doing it because they know that they're doing something that is going to like make you feel better, light you up, you know, like whatever it might be, then why would we not want to look at that, is what I think.
So is that going, because I can remember years ago and I can't remember the name of it. Does this go beyond the likes of the win-win situation? Because I'm sure there's a stage after win-win and I can't remember the name of it. Does this actually go beyond that win-win situation? So it's more of a, I don't know, a spiritual kind of thing.
Yeah, possibly. Well, it would, you know, if everyone gets their needs met. I've not kind of studied that, if that's a methodology, that win-win. So I don't know, can't really talk to it. But um, a win-win situation is where, you know, why would you not? And it's going to make everyone feel happy and things like that. So it sounds, you know, along the same
Mm.
lines. But it's just coming from this place of empathy, love, kindness. So really coming back to the how to communicate like a giraffe, just to like weave that in, because I've got notes and it's kind of all over the place. But um Marshall Rosenberg talks about jackals and giraffes, and it's handy to think in those terms because you might listen to this and think, oh, brilliant, I'm going to try it. But you have to bear in mind that 99% of the population have not studied how to communicate like a giraffe. As much as I will be optimistic and look on the bright side of, you know, the podcast going absolutely mentally viral and everyone listening to it in the world, you know, unlikely. So if they've not all studied Marshall Rosenberg's communication method or listened to Mind, Mood and Food, I mean, why wouldn't they? I don't know. But let's say, for example, you're walking around as a giraffe and you've got your giraffe ears on because you've trained in this method, but you're coming across jackals all the time because they don't know how to communicate like a giraffe. So a jackal will communicate still in the way that, you know, we've always been raised in society to communicate, to be kind of like very egoic. So we're always looking at protecting ourselves, coming from the ego. The ego needs to protect. It's very, very unhappy with, you know, anyone criticizing us
Mm.
at all. And if you're not sure, just talk to some teenagers because my teenagers are amazing at demonstrating this right now. So this jackal giraffe thing is, I'm really glad we're revisiting it because it's like, oh, so when you've got jackals going, yeah, well, I haven't done it because, and they give you this list of why they've not done it, and this real defensiveness.
Mm.
If you go back as a jackal and you don't know how to translate what they're saying into giraffe language, you're just going to be like,
Batten your head,
especially if you're
brick wall.
perimenopausal and, you know, not good. Why does God give us perimenopause and teenagers around the same time? I don't know.
Oh,
Why would you do that? So you know you might need this training as much as I do. So if you're coming up against a jackal that is blaming, criticizing, and complaining about your behavior, you're going to need to be able to translate it. And how you do that, obviously, this I did a training on this for like an hour and a half in one of my groups. So we're only going to be like 20, 25 minutes here. So it's like not going to get all of the information in. But what these podcasts do, I hope, is to give people that
a little bit of
interest.
flavour,
And
a
if
little
this,
bit of.
yeah, it's like, oh, I didn't know about that. And you can play with it. You can go and find out more about it. You could do one of my masterclasses on it if you like. Let me know if that's of interest. I still have them available. Um, so yeah, it's about translating the need underneath the request. So if
Exactly.
someone is saying to you, well, you never come round, you know, a family member, I don't
Mm.
see you enough, blah, 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 and you kind of take that as a, oh, they're kind of criticizing me, you know, well, you're too busy to fit me into your busy schedule kind of thing. If you see beyond that kind of angry critique,
Mm.
instead of getting defensive and going, yeah, well, you know, it's because I've got so much on and da 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 and like getting all defensive and then you're just not getting anywhere. if you can translate that as, well, what's the need underneath that request? Because it is a request, it comes
Yeah,
across a bit like, a criticism.
I'd probably see that as loneliness, to be quite fair. That,
Yeah, and that, so there's a need there for the person that they're missing because they love that person, because they like that person, because they value you, they like you, they love you, and they just are missing you and they want to see more of you because
yeah,
of whatever that need is, depending on the circumstance. So it could be someone that's not seeing anyone very much and they might be lonely, like you say. It could be that they are seeing lots of people, I think, in the case that I've got in my head, but they just don't see you enough because, they miss you. And that suddenly makes you feel a lot more different about that communication than if you hear it as a jackal rather than a giraffe.
yeah.
That makes
God, that
sense.
makes loads of sense. Yeah,
It
just
was like life changing for me. And like I said, this is not something that comes naturally. As with a lot of the yoga stuff, I don't know why. I do know a little bit why we're wired like this. I'm not going to go into it now. I've not got the time, in terms of why we're wired, in terms of negative thinking and all of that. But
yeah.
it just feels like it's always pushing uphill, doesn't it, when you're trying
Oh
to
yeah,
change your brain and how it works. But this is another example of that. So this is a reason why I think we need a practice. So we need our yoga practice, whatever that looks like for you. And I always say this, it could be that that's an hour on your mat every day doing yoga postures, or it could be that, it's walking meditation in nature, or, something that just sitting in stillness in the morning and having that quiet time. We need some kind of a practice to help us to then be able to move through the world and be more mindful and more
yeah,
conscious of what's going on. What's going on for us when we get that flash of irritation or anger at something that might be communication, or it might be, whatever it might be that you're coming up against, and to be able to just have that beat in between reacting so that you can respond rather than react. So this stuff is difficult. So if you've not got any kind of practice, you know, be gentle with yourself, because you'll listen to this, think that sounds great, and then forget about it, and you'll just go back to your normal way of being, unless you've got something that reminds you always to come back to kindness and love. And if you do have a yoga practice and it's just, an hour in a studio a week and you do it for like keep fit reasons, and then it's not changing who you are as a person and making you a better person, then you've got to question, like, is that really yoga? um do you know what I mean? So these teachings they run deep, and the yamas and the niyamas, which is what ahimsa is one of those, is all to do with this being a better person, seeing through more loving eyes, and being more gentle with yourself and others. So it's not easy. It's not easy work to
no,
try
that's
in
no,
the
that's
heat of
certain
the
times
moment,
definitely not. Oh,
in that conversation. Can you
yeah,
think of one recently? I bet you can, where you've like
yeah, yeah. I can
gone.
think definitely a few, definitely a few, and I wouldn't say there was a half. I'd probably say they're actually with friends more than
Mm,
anything else.
mm,
So I think me and Darren have kind of got to this understanding of asking how each other are,
mm.
and just understanding a bit more about that. But when it comes to friends, you don't see them as often, and just now and again, it's just like now I'm going to take a breath before I start speaking.
At least you've got that a level of awareness, like I said, most people don't even have that. So I'm hoping that through these podcasts and through everything that we do, that it's going to spread that word a little bit. So yeah, when you're taking that breath, when you're thinking, like, how am I going to communicate, and how am I going to translate that back? So it's two ways. So let me go through the steps of how to do this. So the jackal accuses, judges, reproaches, and manipulates. That's the ego self, the self with the small s, if you want to translate it into yogi terms. The giraffe is open, respectful, assertive. So I think this can be a misconception when you start looking at this love and light. in the yoga world that, you know, you're just going to be a walkover.
No,
Not at
it's not the
all.
case.
And I like to call it quiet strength. You know, so another animal you could think of something like a lioness, something like that. So they're not like the lion, like rah, just going out there roaring at everything, but they're still just as powerful.
Oh yeah.
But they're like, you know, they're quieter. They might be looking after their young and just keeping a watch. But if it's needed, they will step up. So they are assertive, giraffes, and they're not judgmental. Again, this is your higher self.
Hmm.
Nothing to do with the ego that defends and cannot handle criticism. Giraffe is open to criticism, you know, okay, bring it on. I'll consider it, yeah, with an open mind.
Yeah.
So the steps are number one is observation. And what this has got quite a bit to it, but basically means stick to the facts. So when I'm working one-on-one with people, been going through this with a client recently, and now we're trying to do like a bit of role play around it, but it's about not interpreting what you're hearing and putting your flavor on it, because then that's not a fact, that's your interpretation, and that's where people can trip up. So if you're like saying what I'm seeing is or what I'm hearing is, and you're trying to observe, so you play it back to them just to check that what you've heard is correct. You know, when you don't do the jobs when I'm away or whatever, you know, we're just talking about, it's because you don't care about me. You know, that would not be a fact, because how do you really know that? That's you just judging, casting. So be careful of opinions and judgments when it comes to this stuff, because it's not an observation if you're putting your flavor onto it, because then they're going to go, well, that's not true, and then that's where it gets wrong. So try to play it back. I can see that X, Y, Z, you know, what I'm hearing is. And so part in this pillar of observation, one of the biggest skills, and we could just do a whole thing on this on its own, is listening. And listening is a very, very scarce skill, I would say. I don't come across many people that listen well, you know? And I try to work on it myself, because I'm aware that I grew up in a family where we're all talkers, and you know, true listening and not just listening waiting to kind of jump in, you know how we do that. Oh, something's popped up in my head and I want to say this. That's what we're like as a family. So I'm aware of that myself.
It's very much why we've got two ears and one mouth.
Yes. So that's what I mean. This little part, you know, this little nugget in this whole podcast, you could just think about this, if nothing else. Just try to become a better listener. So if you are listening to a friend or, you know, a family member or a partner, you're never going to be able to translate their communication into what that need is, and to come back with your giraffe openness if you're not really even listening properly, and you're just kind of like you've got something running around in your head. You're not being present. You're not fully immersed in what they're saying. And so if you try and play that back, then you're probably going to have misjudged it and got it wrong anyway, because you've made it all about you immediately. And it's not, it's probably more about them. You know, what they're saying is more about them than you.
So having that awareness, as you say, to have that openness, have that open mind, and to probably quite impossible, but you know, try and calm down your own thoughts so you can really tune in to what they're saying.
Yeah, and that is difficult, but that's where meditation comes in and things like that. And if you practice it and play with it, you can make it like a little experiment, you know, to be really present, and that means not going off in your head. You know, how many times do people, they're telling you something about they're not well or something's going on, and then you're like, oh yeah, I've had that, and then you just go back with your bit, and then it's like, oh, who's got the worst story? Who's been the illest? It's like a competition. And you know, the more you play with it, the more you'll notice other people doing it, and then you can kind of smile and be like, oh, they're doing the jackal thing. So try to stick to facts is step number one if you're writing it down. Number two is identify the emotion that is stirring in you. So how do you feel about it? And there's loads of emotions, but according to this work, there's only four main ones, and then most of the others are a variation of that one. So like anger, sadness, fear, and joy. And trying to use sentences like, I feel hurt when, you know, you've stated the fact, this is the thing that maybe you're not keen on, this behavior. And if it's fact rather than opinion, it's like every weekend, I do this, and this. I've noticed that you don't ever do the laundry or whatever it might be. I'm just using that as an example. But if that's a fact, it's just trying to state the facts rather than that judgment and the criticism. So it's like trying to tread carefully with it. So what I've noticed is, or what I hear that, and then when that happens, I feel hurt. And then it's like, well, why do you feel hurt? So this is where you need to have a little think about what your need is that is not being met before you go into the conversation. Have that ready, especially if it's a difficult conversation that you want to really address. So, you know, I've always found it important to, it's a good sentence opener phrase like that. It matters to me that. So, what is it that they need? Because the need there might be equality. It might be that you've grown up in a house where it just wasn't equal and that doesn't feel good to you, or it might be that you feel that they're not demonstrating respect or love, so thinking about those needs,
Yeah.
it matters to you, really matters to you. And if they know that, instead of just going, you're a lazy bleep, 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 and you never do a damn thing,
Yeah.
it, suddenly they actually are like wanting to do the thing now because you're like, I'm going to feel more joy if you just do the hoovering every week or something, or, you know, how we all have different love languages, which I think we might have to do. I think we might be
Oh
doing a
God,
different podcast on that at some point. But
definitely.
mine is like acts of kindness and stuff like that. So I love it if like my husband buys me flowers and we do that. He does that every week now. And that, but if you've not gone, you never do this and you never show any, and you've said it in that way, they're not going to want to do that because they're
Not
now
at all.
angry at you for giving them the nag nag moan moan. Whereas if you're like, I can't tell you how much joy it brings me when you bring me a little gift, or it might be that it's a kind word, that your love language is,
Mm.
words of affirmation, and that makes you feel happy. And so that brings us to point four, which is the request. And request is an important word to write down. It's not a demand. So what we have to be willing to do is to hear a no. So you go, oh, I've done all this lovely nonviolent communication and I want you to do the hoovering every week. Okay, let's go. Are you going to do it? And then they go, no. You can't then be like, so all of the non-violence goes out the window because now you're like going on
Hang on.
strike, you're leaving, you're getting, separation. It's like, no, it's got to be a request that you're willing to hear
A
no.
no for, yeah,
And
yeah,
that it doesn't come with any like consequences. Well, if you don't, because it is a genuine conversation where we're trying to get everyone's needs met. And really, if we are present and we are understanding what their needs are as well and what they're saying, then there might be a two-way conversation needed there, which is why they don't want to do the thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then maybe it's like, well, there could be some other way. So it's not easy to cover this topic in 20 minutes or so. So I just wanted to make sure that, we'd got an understanding of where it comes from. It comes from this non-violence, it comes from this word ahimsa in yoga, and that there's four main steps, but there's a lot more to it. So if people want more, get in touch, look it up online. There's lots of YouTube videos about it as well. And it's a really, really good way of playing with your communication.
yeah, definitely. Maybe this is a two-parter, Riddle.
Yeah, I know we keep saying that, don't we? But absolutely, and I think once we've covered the basics, you can always come
Yeah,
back and revisit it. Because there's lots of things in there about watching what you're thinking, watching your tone of voice, checking that you're not you know, saying one thing and your body language totally means another. So there's lots to it that's fun to explore. But hopefully, did that give you a flavour?
Definitely, definitely did. And just that, even if the only thing, and I'm closing my eyes because my eyes are hurt.
Oh,
The only thing that people take away from this is just to start understanding that there is a different point of view
hmm.
and take a second to let that sink in.
And that your way is not the only way, and there's two people involved in that conversation, and the whole thing about listening better and using that as a practice, that in itself is such a good practice if you take nothing else but just to make a promise to listen in your next, you know, conversation with a loved one. That alone will change the game, you know.
Definitely, definitely. Wow. Hopefully, there's a lot less jackals and more giraffes out there. Please.
Yay, the giraffes. Let us know in the comments if you're, you know, going to change your ways and become a giraffe.
Definitely. I love giraffes, so we should all be
I
giraffes,
love
definitely.
giraffes. Do you know they're my favorite animal at the zoo?
Oh, fantastic.
Whenever you go to the zoo, I just love them. They just look like absolutely prehistoric. They're amazing.
Yeah,
They don't look
absolutely.
real, do they? They look like dinosaurs. They're so tall and graceful
Elegant.
and yeah, they're lovely.
Oh,
And calm, you know, very calm, aren't they?
yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for that, Adele. That was very a great insight. I can see that spilling over into part two. But yeah,
Yay.
absolutely share this podcast with your friends and do like. If you'd like to subscribe, please do. And we'd love to hear your comments. So,
We would. And if you have got jackals in your life and you want them to have a little eye opener into how to be more giraffe, send them a link
oh,
to
yes,
the
definitely.
podcast. What a good way to be like, do you know what? I'm not jumping in with any criticism, but you might want to give this a little listen.
Definitely. Just opening that conversation. Thank you very much, Adele, and I'll see you next
See you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
time.